all of you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining in this conversation, the theme of which is substance use in the family, the objective of which is to really just expand our repertoire of knowledge around substance use and find ways of preventing the occurrence as far as is possible and getting timely intervention where necessary. So we'll be starting with asking the question, why is it that teens use substances? I have here with me two guests. One is an educator, the other both are educators in different areas, yeah. And I'm a mental health professional. So welcome. I'd like to invite Florence to introduce herself and then speak to us for about 15 minutes, after which we transition to the next presenter. But before you make your presentation, do your introduction, and then we have Jacob introduce himself. Then you launch into your presentation, after which Jacob now will just come in and start the presentation. I think that would be better.
All right.
And Thank you. I'll turn off my camera over Florence.
Thank you, Maureen. And thank you, everybody who has managed to join us today. My name is Florence, and I'm a teacher. So that qualifies me to call myself an educator. And I passionately love working with teenagers. But being a teacher, and now that I'm a teacher in a virtual school called Kidato, so the virtual space that we are in now is my platform where I use every single day for teaching. I'm a mother. I am a mother of two sons. My youngest is at the stage where we are going to handle today. My youngest is 16 years, and and my oldest is a graduate already working. So yeah, I think it's good to just put our heads together and have this conversation. And thank you, Maureen, for having me.
All right. Asante sana, Florence. Jacob.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name has been mentioned. I'm called Jacob Aduda. I'm a substance use prevention practitioner from NACADA. And in NACADA, I do public education and advocacy. So I majored on prevention and treatment. I am a father of two teenagers, a boy and a girl. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much for welcoming me to this space to be able to speak to parents about issues of substance use that affect their children and perhaps even affecting them as parents. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So we'll proceed to have Florence speak to us, after which Jacob will come in and also speak to us some more. And then we get into the conversation. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them on the chat. We'll take them after the presentations. Welcome, Florence.
Thank you very much, Maureen. And I will still appeal to my audience that if you are comfortable turning on your camera, I would really, really appreciate, because I like addressing people that I can see. But all in all, I hope you lend me your ears if the cameras are not turning on. So I'm a teacher by profession, and I've worked in two systems, and that has made me be in a position to really analyze some of the things that affect children. And when I talk about being in two systems, I've taught in the Kenyan system. So I taught for like 9 years in the 844 schools. And then I transitioned to the British National Curriculum schools. And that is where I am currently. And I have seen things that affect our children. So I sometimes when I hear our children in public schools, because my kids have gone through the Kenyan system, the 844 system. And when I see in the news, when things are being, when information is being given on children unrest in schools, I can pinpoint a few things that I think contribute to the same. Other than use of drugs and all that, I can pinpoint a few things. And these things actually stem from the family. So before the child goes out there and is offered any substance to use and abuse it, we need to look very carefully in the home, in the house, as parents, our relationship with the children. But before I get there, I'm just going to take us through, I guess this is the beginning. And so we need to understand a few things, or we need to deliberate on a few things before we even look at the use of substances. So before I even share my presentation, I would like us to maybe define the word substance. When we talk of use of substance, what do we understand by this? And I'm just going to ask us in the house to just chip in. When we talk of substance, what is this? All right, I can see somebody has said it's something that intoxicates.
Yes, I was going to say something similar. It's something you consume that is likely to affect your behavior or your or mood, or yeah, it just affects you in a certain way, in a most likely negative way.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Any input from anybody else? All right. So I will just go with those two feedbacks that for us to gather here and say there is an issue, then we are talking of anything that when anybody consumes, it affects the normal functioning of an individual. So in this case, we are going to look at some of the terms, and allow me to share my screen. As I share my screen, Jacob, maybe you want to chip in for us and define for us what a substance is or substances are.
Okay, I don't know how to answer that, but for us in the field of prevention and treatment, we can say that we are not just talking about substance, because there are so many substances around, but the ones that people abuse are the ones that they are capable of altering some body functions or some organ functions in a human being, maybe altering them from normal to abnormal, or altering them from abnormal to normal, depending on which side of the equation you are in. So when somebody is taking medicine, it is changing the functions that are abnormal to normal. But when somebody takes a psychoactive substance because of pleasure or leisure, then we say it's altering the body functions from normal to abnormal.
Thank you, Jacob. So I guess today, because I saw the topic, and the topic is substance use in the family. So I want to believe that we are looking at any substance or substances that when ingested or used alters from normal to abnormal. Yeah, so I thought it's good for us to maybe define a few terms. And so I looked at the word use, and this is used in relation to substance. And so I said substance use is any consumption of alcohol or drugs. Use, something as commonplace as having a beer with friends during dinner is considered substance use. Substance use may not be a problem or lead to abuse or dependency in some people. So when we talk of use of substance, as Jacob told us, you can use a substance like medicine, like prescription medication, that will change your body function from abnormal to normal because you are sick. So when you use a substance, it doesn't necessarily, we cannot say it's necessarily equals to the negative. It can be you're using a certain substance for positive effects. But again, now there's another way when we use these substances, now it becomes an abuse. So substance abuse is when someone continues to use drugs or alcohol even when it causes problems, such as trouble with family, work, and so forth and so on. So I guess this is the area that we are actually going to focus on when our teenage children start using some substances and then they end up abusing them. For example, I remember sometimes back, cough syrup was banned, right? Because, is it true, Jacob, that cough syrup, like the syrup that has codeine, was banned because our children were taking them to school and overdosing on them and then sleeping? Yes?
Okay, let me paraphrase it a little bit.
Yes.
I think they did not ban them per se, but you know, for you to take codeine, for those who use codeine, because codeine, you know, is that the substance or the chemical component that makes the cough syrup to make you to be sleepy or that makes you to be high. So it is that one that I think if it is in large quantity or somebody is using it without the prescription of the doctor, that is what is not allowed.
Oh yeah, but I know, like when your child has like homa and they go back to school, like if they're in boarding, any of those cough syrups in most of the schools are not accepted nowadays. Or if they're taken, they're under the custody of the nurse.
Yes, I know the schools are very strict on even the consumption of medicine that are given to students in boarding schools.
Yeah.
Or even on those ones that are day scholars.
So, so abuse comes in now when we take these substances that you're talking about, when we take them continuously, even if it's causing the negative effects in the body. That is when it becomes abuse. And then from abuse, it goes to another level where it brings in the dependence. That means an individual is not able to function without the consumption of this medication. It could be even painkillers, that instead of your body adjusting into functioning or beating that pain on its own, now it's becoming highly dependent on the painkiller or the painkillers. And so that is when now it rises from use to abuse to dependency. Now, when I was asked to come and do this, I tried to look at the things that I've seen in school, and I've actually narrowed down to factors that contribute to teens using substances, and I've narrowed down to a few areas. So the first area is the factors that are societal factors. As I was growing up, drugs were not available, and even alcohol. I could see older people taking alcohol. But now, where I am right now, it's like the society has made it normal. The society has normalized the use of drugs. And this is so because drugs have become like more acceptable in society, all right? And these teenagers, our young children, teenagers, they end up taking substances because it has become accepted by society, all right? If you meet a teenager, you know, sometimes you walk past people and if they've smoked things like bang, you can smell it. Yes, isn't it, Jacob? But you have no authority to stop somebody else's child and ask, are you smoking bang? Because they'll turn on you. The society will gang up against you. So it's like it's become a norm. If you're smoking, it's your problem. Smoke it. I'm not going to get bothered because it's not my child. So it's like it has been normalized by the society. Also, our teenagers engage in this because they desire to be like others. You know, those who are using these drugs or substances, they seem to be like cool. They are the cool guys in society. And so your own teenager who is not using this would like to be like the cool ones. And so they end up being enticed into using these substances. And then they're very cheap. Nowadays, they're cheap. All right, they're readily available. So if they're readily available, then they are cheap. And so accessibility, the children access, our teenagers accessing them has become a little bit easier because they've become cheap, they're readily available. And as time goes, we are seeing inventions of other substances that were not even there like 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So as we continue progressing in life, we are seeing other brands coming into the market, and the more they are, the cheaper they are. Also, I don't know how many of us can attest to the fact that almost every center in Kenya, especially the rural areas, there's a place, a corner where you can get things like myriad, and it's just displayed in the open. I don't know, is myriad a substance, Jacob? Tell us.
I can say myriad is a psychoactive substance because of the active agents in myriad that makes it not to be classified as a vegetable, but to be classified as a drug are 3. And we have what we call the cathinone, and also the tannine. So those are the ones that makes myriad to be classified as a drug. And for your information, even if you go to the WHO website, you will find myriad is already classified as a drug. Thank you.
Yes, and you find that almost every corner you find those leaves hanging. There is somebody selling myriad somewhere, so readily available. And they've even brought it to the doorsteps of the school. So just outside the school there, somebody selling something. And when you dig deeper, it's maybe substances are disguised as sweets, as biscuits, and so forth and so on. And so forth and so on. So I'm just going to move on because there's one area that I really want to focus on. And as I focus on this, and I believe that those of us who are here, these slides can be available to us, but I would like us to talk a little bit, to have a little bit of a discussion on family-related factors. And I'm going to even stop sharing my screen, and those slides can be shared with you, but I just want to focus on what I have observed as a teacher. And when I talk about observing as a teacher, I'm talking about children as young as 10, abusing drugs or substances. And so that brings us to the question, why is this happening? And I just want to narrow down to the family relationships or family, yes, the family setup. Now, I don't know how many of us have children in boarding schools, Kenyan boarding schools, high schools, the teenagers, those who are in class 8, class 7. I don't know, maybe by show of a hand so that I know if this discussion is going to be brought home in terms of you will resonate with what I'm going to talk about. So I can see Macreen there. Anybody else who has a child in our Kenyan system, the 844 system, because I believe our teenagers, the CBC has not found them yet. They are in the 844 system. So it's only Steve, Macreen, and myself because I have one. Jacob, are your kids in 844?
Okay, my kids are in both systems, okay. 844 and the CBC.
All right, so CBC and 844, we are still talking about the Kenyan system. Now, I will bring a situation where our children go to school and they get handled by teachers who are overwhelmed, because I know the ratio of teachers to students now is just an overwhelming one. And so the teachers our system, especially the 844 system, being an exam-oriented system, the teacher has no extra time to even look keenly at a child and be able to see the emotional turmoil or the challenges that this child is facing, other than him or her teaching and making sure that they get a mean score, a high mean score. So what has happened? Now at home, our parents are also, we are very busy, and we must admit and appreciate the fact that as most of us as Kenyan parents, we don't cultivate that close relationship with our children as young as when they're young. So by the time they're becoming teenagers, you find that there's a barrier between us and our children. And I say this because I know most of the time in school, when children make mistakes and you want to bring the parent in, you find that children almost go on their knees to tell you, please don't tell my mom, please don't tell my dad. So when it gets to such a situation where there's no relationship, the children are afraid of the parents, the very, very people that they need to run to when there's a problem. Then whom do they run to? They run to their peers, and these peers could be the ones who will introduce them to drugs. And because they want to fit into that peer group, then they end up being introduced to the use of substances. All right. I have also, as I said at the beginning, I have taught in the 844 system, and now I'm teaching in a British national curriculum system. Now, the difference here is in this British national curriculum, it's very tedious, something that is almost like the CBC one now, where the parents are 100% involved in their children's learning, to an extent that if there's a small change in the behavior of the children, the parent is able to see almost immediately and maybe clamp down that kind of behavior. And maybe if it's substances that are being introduced to your child, you're very vigilant and you're able to see change in behavior and try to find out what exactly this change of behavior is stemming from. So I would say that the lack of close relationships with our children has pushed our children into looking for that love from other places, from peers. And then when they go into drugs, they're also taking drugs because they are told, if you have problems, if you smoke, if you chew mirror, or if you inject yourself, your problems will disappear. So, and that is how our children get to go into using substances. Now, another thing is, we know that I have come to learn that there are learning challenges with most of our children. All children are not the same. So we have children who have learning difficulties, conditions like dyslexia. I don't know if you've ever seen a child who does not know the difference between a D and a B, or a 6 and a 9. I don't know if there's anybody in the room who has ever seen that. I don't know if you've ever, yes, Macreen?
In the movies, I've seen in the movies.
You've seen in the movies. All right, let me tell you, it's a reality. And I will tell you of an example of a child that I taught. And at that time, myself as a teacher, I didn't even know that there's anything like dyslexia. So this child would write a piece of composition, you can't read. As a teacher, I couldn't read. I would even give to my colleagues to read for me, nobody could read. But when you call the child and tell the child, please read for me what you have written, the child will give you the story from the beginning to the end, but you cannot read. But himself, he's able to read that. So I later on came to discover that child had a condition called dyslexia. But because we didn't understand, the parents didn't understand, so what will happen to that child out of frustration? Chances are they will end up abusing substances just to run away from this problem. We also have children who have conditions that are called ADHD. ADHD is attention deficit, ADHD, hyperactive disorder. So these children who can never sit still, they're always, and they're categorized and labeled as very naughty. But in real sense, they are wired differently. What they need is interventions in school and interventions at home in terms of diet and all that. But because we don't understand and we don't know this, these children end up being frustrated because they end up being rebellious, extremely rebellious. And what do? Most of them, a big percentage, like 70%, end up abusing drugs because we will push them, they'll go to high school. When they get to high school, they get the same teachers who are only after the mean score. And so the child gets frustrated. And so for me, I think the common denominator in which we need to look at carefully as parents is our relationships at home. We have our kids coming home now for 2 months. How, when they come home, can we look at them carefully? Can we be a soft board for them to land? Because I know in high school, in boarding schools, the teachers have no time for these children, and it's not their responsibility to some extent. But again, as parents, what are we doing to make sure that when our children come home, they feel appreciated, they feel loved, they feel understood? Are we going to put pressure on them more and more in terms of, why did you get a C-? Why did you get a D? Why did you get an E? You see, we need to separate the child who is an individual from the scores or the performance, because you love your child unconditionally, whether they are bringing you an E or bringing you a D or bringing you an A. That doesn't make them less human. That doesn't make them less respectable. That doesn't make them less loved. You have to love them unconditionally. So I think for me, the thing that before we start saying the school is not providing enough security, they're not frisking the children enough, the drugs are coming to school, what is making the child pack drugs and take them to school? That is, we need to look at the home unit, the relationship that we have with our kids at home, so that we equip them enough that they can be able to resist peer pressure, resist trying to be validated by other people outside there. We validate them in the house before they go out there. So I have my slides. Ms. McCreen has them. She will share if need be, but I think other than that, it would be nice to have a discussion and see exactly where the rain starts to beat us as parents, and as to why our children start using substances. What are they trying to compensate for? Because every behavior has a denominator, a common denominator behind it. McCreen, I think I will stop there. I've really talked a lot trying to beat time, but I guess with the questions we'll be able to discuss further.
Okay. So thanks a lot for that very passionate presentation. Big takeout there is that we need to reflect on what our contributions are from the family front to the concern that is substance use by teenagers. So that gives us a good transition to what Jacob has to share with us, from the public advocacy point of view and intervention. So welcome, Jacob.
Thank you.
I think I could give you access to, to share your screen. So give me a moment.
I hope you can be able to see.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Florence, and also McCreen, for the talks that you have had so far. One thing that we need to ask ourselves is, why do young people start using psychoactive substances? First of all, we are going to look at what are the substances that they use. And in NACADA, we have we have done surveys. One of our mandates is to do the surveys and on the trends on the usage of psychoactive substances. We did one for secondary schools in the year 2016, and we collaborated with those partners that are indicated there, both the learning institutions and the teachers' unions, all those organizations that are linked in one way or another with education in Kenya. The results that we found is that for the kids between the ages of 13 to 15 years, it is critical because that's the time that they are transitioning from primary schools to secondary schools. And that's also the time that they initiate or the age of debut of drug use in Kenya. And in our studies, we also asked them lifetime or ever use of alcohol and drugs. And we found that alcohol was the predominant one, or it was the one used highest, and followed by those other drugs, as you can see in this data. I'm sure Macrin will be able to share with you our presentation for purposes of reference. But we find that across the range of drugs that are used, alcohol was the one consumed most. And even in the surveys that we have done throughout the country, even for others, alcohol is still the #1 psychoactive substance that is used in our country. We've also looked at those who have used it. Remember, these are secondary students, those who have been using for the last 6 months. And we found that still alcohol at 9.3%, almost 10% were using alcohol for the last 6 months, which means that whether they're in secondary schools, in boarding schools, or in day schools, where they're day schooling, you'll find that they were still using the psychoactive substances. But another angle is that even prescription drugs, these are the drugs that people buy over the counter, were also in high demand, or they were using it more. Myriad, tobacco, marijuana or bangi, heroin and cocaine also featured in. So if you look at it, you'll find that our children or our school-going children are already using these psychoactive substances. Now, if in our survey also, we looked at the current use of alcohol and drugs among secondary school students, which means that these are now people who are regularly using. And still you'll find that close to 4% were regular users or were currently using the psychoactive substances, for example, alcohol. Prescription drugs still feature there. There is myriad, there is tobacco, there is bang, there are inhalants, there is heroin, and also there is cocaine. You can bear me witness, for those who have interacted with students who are intoxicated that or who are using psychoactive substances, that it is costly. Even treating them, it's also costly in terms of damage that they can cause as a result of usage of such substances. Now, what are the periods when drugs and substances of abuse are used in schools? Mostly during school holidays, for example, when they are off the school grid system, or when they are off the watch of the teachers, and perhaps they are off the watch of parents. Sometimes also on their way home from school. Remember, if they are doing the schooling, or if they are coming from schools and they have been in the boarding school. You remember the cases whereby a matatu driver was sacked by the SACCO. Those children were coming from secondary school. They were going back home, and remember, they were drunk in between the gap or the distance from their homes and the school environment. Sometimes during weekends, they can consume also, that is 30%. During inter-school meetings, remember the rules are relaxed at that time, 27%. During school outings, during entertainment periods in schools, during games, and also during school trips. Remember, during these periods that they exploit the gaps, that the rules of the schools are relaxed, or perhaps the teacher is not watchful, because students know when the teacher is not watchful, they'll tend to use those psychoactive substances. Okay. So we also, in our findings, common sources of drugs and substance abuse used by secondary school students. Some of these have been mentioned by my colleague, Madam Florence. So, for example, 32% were getting it from friends, which these friends are maybe from schools or from the neighborhood. Some carry the drugs from home. Some are bought from other students, bought from a bar near school. Remember, the bars in Kenya nowadays, people do not regard the rules of 300 meters from school, from a local brew den, from kiosks or shops near school, from relatives, from supermarkets, from non-teaching school workers. Remember, these are the staff, the support staff within the schools. From parents, I've had instances whereby parents are consuming psychoactive substances or drugs together with their children, or they have even those drugs in their fridges, so that the children can access as well as the parents. Some also get it from teachers, and you'll realize that the teachers have a lot of influence also on these students. So what are the risk factors associated with the drug and alcohol and drug abuse in secondary schools? Remember, in the field of prevention and treatment, we have both the risk factors and the protective factors. Now, when we looked at the risk factors, some of them that I'll mention just in passing, for example, being male and being in a school with male students, you know, the bravado that comes with the boys, and they also tend to be more inquisitive or more exploratory in terms of wanting to consume those psychoactive substances. Being in Form 3 or Form 4, remember, this is the stage that they are almost exiting or transitioning to adulthood. So they tend to be more averse at risk taking. So those are some of the examples. Having fewer frequency of inspection in schools, perhaps the school administration is not very strict with those. Now, in our surveys also, we found that those who are schooling in Lower Eastern, Central, or Upper Eastern were more at risk, or they tended to consume the psychoactive substances more. Living with a single parent who is a father, and this now brings the aspect of parenting that Madam Florence talked about. And later on, we'll come to realize that parenting plays a key role as to whether a child will be vulnerable to taking psychoactive substances in his or her life. Not being an active member of a religious group or club exposes a child, or expose those in secondary school, more to drug and psychoactive substances. Having a high amount of pocket money, remember this, some parents give their children a lot of pocket money, and remember they are just learning to manage their finances. So in most cases, if that money is not spent on anything, it can find its way into purchase of drugs. Having a family member or friend using alcohol or other drugs can also be a factor that makes them to be at risk of getting initiated to drug use and substance use. Also, lack of awareness that alcohol and drugs are detrimental to academic performance. So you'll find that ignorance will make them, there's something we call, when there's low perception to risk, somebody will use a psychoactive substance. If there's high perception that a drug will cause harm to me, I'll not use it. Now, if there's lack of awareness towards that point, you'll find that somebody will be using a psychoactive substance without knowing the effects that it can bring to him or her. Now, the summary of the findings in the secondary school study is that the home environment is a major risk for initiation of drugs by students. Remember, in the earlier slides, we say that most of the drugs, they access it from home. Most of the initiation begins at home. So secondary schools in Kenya are also not drug-free environments. Perhaps the teacher is using it. Perhaps even their colleagues are using it while in hiding in the school. Then the age of onset to substance of abuse marks the period of transition from primary school to secondary schools. So the age 13 to 15 is a very high risk age. Then there is also less supervision and inspection of students for drugs in schools, or perhaps they are not very strict enough. I know there are some schools that nowadays even use the CCTV, but that might not be necessarily enough. Then the guidance and counseling teachers are also not equipped to deal with alcohol and drug abuse. And perhaps they are not even trained on that. Some of the teachers don't even know how some of these drugs looks like. So the students may hide these things in plain sight. So we also did for primary schools in 2018, and I'll try to move a little bit faster. And we found that 20% of primary schools pupils have ever used at least one drug or substance of abuse in their lifetime. That's a fifth of them. And remember, these are primary school children. So 10% of these pupils have ever used prescription drugs in their lifetime. We are talking of prescription drugs that have not been given by a doctor or a nurse. 7% of primary school pupils have ever used alcohol in their lifetime. And 6% of them have ever used tobacco in their lifetime. The number might look small, but if you translate this into the population of the primary school students, pupils, then you'll be able to understand the gravity of what we are saying. So you find that there are various drugs that are used across the board by these pupils. Now, what are the common sources of drugs and substances of abuse for these pupils? You'll find that kiosks or shops near the school, those are danger areas. The bars near the school, the friends. Sometimes these students buy it from other students. There are students who peddle, there are pupils who peddle drugs. I may not mention the names of the schools here, but we've had instances whereby we are called to primary schools whereby both the teachers and the pupils are peddlers. There are also school workers who might be coming in and out of the school. They come from the community. They are not immune from the things, the evils that happen in the society. So periods when drugs are mostly abused during school holidays. I know our pupils, our children are coming back for holidays. That is the danger time, because how many parents spend their time with their children during the school holidays? As a matter of fact, in Nairobi, very few of them. Sometimes on their way home from school, do you check who your children are interacting with? During weekends at school, that's the time that they are relaxing. Or even during inter-school competitions, whereby the rules are relaxed. So effects of drugs and substance abuse among primary school students, we find that drugs or substance abuse, they are associated with class repetition and decline in academic performance. So pupils who also use at least one drug or substance abuse are more likely to repeat class. Remember, these drugs take you off focus, and they will not make you to concentrate on your learning. So it also leads to decline in academic performance. So clearly we can see that these things affect our pupils. So what are the risk factors? So if there's weak parental guidance and enforcement of laws. Now, in the field of drugs and substance use, we have the issues of what makes somebody to be vulnerable to using drugs and psychoactive substances. Now, just to summarize, you'll find that there are two key factors or major factors, which is the individual characteristic of somebody and also the environment. So when we talk of weak parental guidance, we find that most pupils, they don't spend time with their parents. I know every parent is hustling or is looking for means of livelihood. Now, what happens in the absence of this parent, or when this parent comes back home late? You'll find that there's no supervision for this person, and this increases vulnerability. Now, in our studies, we found that primary school pupils were accompanying parents to events where alcohol, any drug was being served. These ones were more likely to use drugs or substances of abuse. I don't want to ask the parents here, whoever consumes drugs or alcohol in the presence of their children. Even if you do, I know you'll not carry your hands. But that one is likely to make your children to be more vulnerable. There's also the availability and accessibility. When I talk of availability or accessibility, I talk of the physical accessibility and the social and economic accessibility. If we talk of the physical accessibility, are those kiosks around the school selling drugs or alcohol? And when we talk of the social and economic one, do they have the money to buy those things? Those ones can also make them to use those psychoactive substances. Other risk factors include conflicts in the family, advertisements, alcohol. Advertisements can be through the mass media, negative role modeling by teachers. Perhaps the teacher is the one consuming, and the existence of bars, shops, or kiosks near schools. Some of them, you might think they are selling food stuff, but they're also selling psychoactive substances like alcohol. I would want to stop there, but in a nutshell, those are some of the reasons why our pupils abuse or consume psychoactive substances. Thank you very much. I'll request for questions from our participants.
Okay. Thank you, Jacob, for that very robust and to the point presentation. Quite some revealing things. Looking at the data that you've shared, I see that the home is a big factor, because you're saying that the majority of the kids get access to the substances from home. And then they also use it at home. They use it when schools are closed, So it means that as the custodians of the homes, we have a big responsibility, And it will be an interesting conversation when we now go to the next step and look at what then do we do. But today we are really just focusing on what are the reasons why the young ones would be engaging in substance use. So heard by Jacob and Florence, what would I want to add? Can you guys see my screen?
Oh, yes, we do. We are able to see.
Yeah, so I had here some points on why it is concerning for us that teens use substances. Some points have been mentioned. So maybe just to add, they are still developing and these substances affect their development. And the effect that usually comes with the use of the substances for some are enduring effects. So you really want to get the teenager in a space where, as far as possible, they don't get to use the substances. Then performance has been mentioned. Health problems is a thing. They are developing, and in that age group, risk-taking is normal. So when they engage in risk-taking behavior and they use substances, then they put themselves at really elevated levels of risk. So you find those who partake are more at risk of engaging in, say, unprotected sex, having multiple sexual partners, taking their parents' cars and going out friends. If they are managing a condition, in the behavior, we don't for our kids, that then we do, those have been spoken. So I was talking about self-medication, so which is something that Florence did touch on. I just want to emphasize on it, that there are those teenagers who may be dealing with some real concerning issues for them, And that causes them to be distressed. And as a consequence of the distress, they may then seek to use the substances as a form of relieving that distress. So on the face of it, you're like, okay, this child is abusing substances, we really want them to stop. But without appreciating what the motivation is, it may be difficult to really help them in the way that is useful. Okay, and supervision has really been emphasized, availability emphasized, a chaotic home environment. Here, the point I'd like to add is the issue of clear boundaries. So some of us as caregivers are not very good at setting clear boundaries. So the boundary between parent and child, child and extended relatives, not clear. And the rules are not consistent. Kids thrive on consistency. So if the rule is that, we do not allow for coming back home past a certain time, if you do, then you forfeit a certain privilege, then it needs to be consistent. It's not that today I'll get the consequence, tomorrow I won't. It then means that I can keep trying, it could just be my lucky day. So there needs to be consistency, and the home environment needs to be stable. Yeah. Parenting styles could be problematic. I have highlighted there authoritarian and permissive. Permissive is, you just do you. We think that by allowing them to do whatever they want, we are loving them. Often that's not helpful. They need firm rules. They need to know this is the extent to which I go, beyond which there's a problem. If that is not defined for them, then it means when they go outside, they could very easily, stray into the spaces where their peers direct them towards. The authoritarian parent may feel that they are in control, but in effect, what they're doing is creating a wall between themselves and the child. And that child may appear to be following the rules in the presence of the parent, but in the absence of the parent, they'll be doing things that when you're told, you'll be like, not my child, that's the neighbor's child. I don't know that child you're talking about. The one I know, you see. So we want to be very particular about how are we parenting our children? Are we allowing them the space to be who they ought to be given their developmental stage? I have had instances where, children are brought to me by their parents because they feel that the child needs to see someone. When I speak to the child, I find that they're being parented like, a rare species of animals. They are not allowed to hang out with their peers, And if they're going out, the parent is there like a shadow. That is not proper. The children need their peers. So what we need is to have it in a properly supervised. If we don't do that, then it becomes problematic. Where we have to separate from our partners because life happens, it helps that we do it with some sense of decorum and sensitivity to the children. When we go all out fighting and, it's like the war between Russia and Ukraine, then it's really problematic. These kids then have so many things going through their head when the parents are separating and fighting, that it raises the level of distress, and using substances becomes for them an option to deal. So we really just want to, take that into consideration. Abuse is a big deal. Maybe the one I'd like to bring out is the abuse where it's the parents who are engaging in abusive interactions. So me and my spouse, we are insulting each other in the presence of the child, or we are physically fighting in the presence of the child. We are not hitting the child, but that does affect the child, because then the child feels, there's a big problem. They are not able to control. They don't know where their allegiances should lie. And that could take them to using substances. Bullying in schools, big problem. Maybe Florence may want to say something about that. And to my knowledge, I don't think there's any school in this country that has no bullying. The difference could just be the form that it takes and the extent to which it happens, you know. So you want to have a relationship with your child such that if bullying is happening, they're able to tell you early enough for you to take, you know, proper intervening actions. Florence, bullying.
You know, Macrin, I stated the fact that now the schools are closing. Can we just be close to our children, because we can be able to see the nitty-gritty in terms of things that they might not be able to tell us. I want us to be a springboard when they come from boarding, especially those who are in boarding school and high school. There is a lot of damage that happens in our schools, that when these children come home, can the home be a safe place for them to be? There's a lot of things, issues to do with homosexuality, we know that, right? The issues to do with bullying, even the bullying from teachers. Trust me, teachers bully students, and I can attest to that. I have seen it. So when the children come home, let us be a shoulder to cry on so that they don't run to the drugs and substances. It is a big thing.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so I think that's it from me in terms of just adding to what has been said. I see we are at 8:32. I would seek your indulgence to allow us like 10 minutes to have any questions, any comments that you guys might have.
Maybe Macrin, we just read
what that we have shared.
There are some questions. There are questions that have already been written in the chat. There are some questions already in the chat, and if you allow me, I can ask. I'll read some of the questions. Yes, Macrin.
Okay.
So I think this is directed to.
Yeah, go ahead.
This could be to Jacob. There's somebody who's asking, why do we say that a single father, a home where there's a single father, is a risk factor?
Okay. In most cases, or even how the society is structured, you'll find that in most cases, the parents spend a lot of time pursuing the economic goals. And you'll find that as a result, there is some detachment. As the children are growing up, you find some detachment from the emotional connection that they need to have with the children. So this becomes a risk factor because there are some things you'll find the children do not want to share with the father. And in the absence of a mother figure, you'll find that they become more vulnerable to getting into other groups like gangs, or even trying psychoactive substances as a means of coping with the stresses that come with such situations in their lives. So studies have discovered that where there is a mother and where there is a father, you'll find that there's a difference in terms of upbringing of the children. And it has been discovered that single parents who are fathers have not done a good job in terms of parenting, which might reduce the risk factors.
Again, maybe to add on what Jacob has told us, I don't know if us as parents in this room, we've been able to observe that when the children are growing, the boys are more attached to their mothers and the girls are more attached to their fathers. And that's why for the girls to flourish in life, the precedence that is set by the fathers in the house will determine how these girls get to turn out later in life, and so vis-a-vis also the boys. And it's a complex, I don't know, Macrin, is it called the Oedipus complex? So both parents play a very big role in setting the pace. And if that pace is not set, then one consequence could be children now turning to substance to compensate for that which they didn't get from the parents. Yeah, and Should I read the next question?
Yes, please.
It says the figure of drug abuse during school holidays is alarming. What is the solution? We are approaching a 7-week holiday. I think that puts a lot of butterflies in our stomachs as parents. What do we do?
Okay. Okay. Now that the topic was set already, but there's a program we have been doing in NACADA called Positive Parenting, whereby we try to sensitize the parents on ways of interacting with their children, because the home is the place where the child is more vulnerable in terms of getting initiated to drug and substance use. And some of the factors that we look into are things like, do you have any structured relationship with your children? How much time do you spend with them every day? What do you discuss with them? Because a parent cannot only provide physical needs, the child needs emotional, the needs of the child includes emotional, the spiritual. How are you upbringing your child? How much do you even know the friends of your children? And if I may ask the parent in Nairobi, how much time do you spend with your children, even after they have come from school? So you see, those are the things that bring vulnerability to the child. I talked briefly about the risk and protective factors. And we've discovered that parenting, if there is weak parenting, then the child can become vulnerable to psychoactive substance use. I know it is brief, but if we had a lot of time, we'll talk more about positive parenting. There is no proper manual for parenting, but there are those basic facts that you can use in steering your children. And as we always say, there's a part the parent plays, there's a part that the child plays, and then the rest also you leave to God.
Yep, thanks for that. And we will cover the interventions in a little more detail, I think, towards the end of the series. So if you stay with us, then we'll be able to, engage a little more in that regard. Yeah, next.
Somebody's asking, I would also like to understand the rationale behind the assumption that learning in certain parts of the country, such as Lower Eastern, is associated with substance abuse as compared to other areas. Jacob.
Oh yeah, that comes from the survey that we undertook. The children of the secondary school students from that area were predominantly consuming the psychoactive substances. But that does not mean that all the pupils or students from that area consume psychoactive substances. I know it looks a little bit stigmatizing, but those are some of the few facts that we gather there. Now, why do people consume psychoactive substances? You see, when we talk of the environmental factors, we look at the laws. Madam Florence talked about the normalization of the consumption of some of these psychoactive substances. For example, the products that are produced within that area, or even the society, they have normalized taking some of these psychoactive substances. And if the society normalizes something, it means that even if the young ones are consuming it, nobody is really bothered. And see, so those are some of the things that you have to factor in. And somebody might ask, how can the society tackle this? We talk of putting in measures or structures like laws or rules within the society. For example, in Kenya, we have, even within every county, there are county bylaws that regulate the consumption of psychoactive substances. How effective are they? That is subject to discussion maybe in another day.
Thank you, Jacob, for that. And this one, I will chip in into this. Second, is there a line between parental abuse and corporal punishment? Because I'm personally an advocate of the latter. That means this person is an advocate of the corporal punishment, And I would like to answer that question because I've seen both sides of the coin. In our Kenyan system, when I became a teacher, I was sent to a class, and the only thing that I saw my colleagues doing were using the cane and using the words to bring down the children, and also to have like some level of respect. So if you're having the cane, the children will kind of respect you, but it's not. I came to realize it's not respect, it's fear. So we want corporal punishment, like inflicting pain on a child, will never bring discipline. It will always create fear. The child will fear doing whatever they're doing, not because they know it's wrong, but because they fear what comes by doing it. But we want to move as a society from a situation where we instill fear in our children to an extent that they don't do things because they fear the consequence, the pain that is going to be inflicted on the body, to a situation where they will not even be swayed to use these drugs or do things that are not right because of the value system. So we want to move to a situation where our children will value the values that we instill in them in our homes to an extent that they will never do what is not right, not because they fear, but because it's the right thing to do. So corporal punishment, whoever wrote this, you might want to reconsider other forms of punishing your actually, it's not even punishment, it's about reducing that undesired behavior.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for that, and maybe just to add, the thing about behavior is that behavior is a language. It's a language that we all use to communicate what our situation in the moment is. And for some, in some instances, we are clear on why we are choosing that behavior. In some other instances, it's not really clear to us, but there is a need that behavior is meeting. So when you find that a child is behaving in a certain way and you don't like it as a parent, to beat the behavior away may seem to be a plausible thing, but it often doesn't work, as has been said. That's on the one hand. The other hand is that the child will do that which they know how. So if they're engaging in a behavior that we find undesirable, it is more likely than not that is how they know to show up in that situation. So if we want them to show up differently, we teach them differently. Caning does not teach anything. It just creates fear and inflicts pain. It doesn't teach any lesson. It doesn't teach any skill. Fine, it will tell me I don't like it, but you don't like it. What do I do? Because so you want to focus more on skilling the child rather than inflicting the pain. The part that now brings in abuse versus discipline is this. When, as a person in authority, we inflict pain to stop a certain behavior that we desire, and in this case, it's apparent to a child, what we are telling them is that when you're in authority, it's okay to use that authority to bring a stop to that which you don't like. When it is me, your parent, you submit to me. So what does that mean? When it is not their parent, it's their sibling, they will use the exact same thing. And when they're hitting their sibling, we don't like it. When they're hitting the neighbor, we don't like it. When they're hitting other kids in their schools, we don't like it. But we will have taught them in the name of disciplining them. So we want to use the alternative means. They are a bit slow, but they're more sustainable. And that's a lesson for another day. Any other question? I think our time is almost gone.
And again, Macrin, corporal punishment, inflicting pain, creates resentment.
Yes,
the children will resent, and look, that's why when it comes to unrest in schools, for me, I look at so many things. I look at situations where the teachers are using corporal punishment to punish, to kind of think of instilling some kind of behavior. They're even using verbal abuses from the children. And so these children, where do they turn to? If at home they're being beaten, at school they're being beaten, insults are being thrown at them, they will go for the substances just to escape the situation.
Yep, that happens. Are we done with the questions?
Yes,
I think.
Yes, we are done.
Yeah, so thanks a lot.
Can I ask just one question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised in the findings that the social media did not feature anywhere in terms of influencing the children towards now going into that behavior of substance use. I mean, there's a home, there's a school environment, but because our kids today are so much in the social media, I would have thought at some point it could be an influencing factor that it starts looking like a good thing to do from what they are seeing, maybe from, who people, some of our celebrities who are influencing behavior. And then I thought something like that would come up.
I think it was their media.
There was
Media.
advertising.
Okay, maybe I missed it.
Yeah, media was there.
It was not.
Okay,
it was
okay.
not social media, but there was the advertisement and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, that covers it. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All righty. So thank you very much for your attendance, for the participation. Presentations were quite on point. Florence, thank you. Jacob, thank you. I think my closing remarks would be that there is many possible reasons why the teenagers could find their way into substance use. Not one single one would be the one. So we really just want to open up the space of being vigilant, being observant, and being available to support them in ways that reduce the likelihood of the risks materializing. Like Jacob said, the fact that the risk is there does not mean it is a foregone matter. It's not deterministic, It just says the likelihood is higher, but if there are certain steps that we take, then the probability is reduced. So we want to step into that space of what then do we do to reduce the risk that may be presented. Asanteni kwa kuja, and do have a good evening and enjoy the rest of your week.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.